Hello, dear friends. Welcome to Crime Story Diaries. Today, we'll be examining a terrifying case, so I invite you to watch the video. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes. On November 3, 2006, what began as an ordinary autumn day in suburban Raleigh, the capital of North Carolina, would soon turn extraordinary. Birchleaf Drive, nestled in a quiet residential area, was typically a place where life unfolded peacefully and predictably. The houses, surrounded by well-maintained lawns and mature trees, exuded a sense of comfort and security. However, the neighborhood's peaceful atmosphere was shattered. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Meredith Fisher arrived at her sister Michelle Young's house. She entered through the garage, the door of which lifted easily by hand. Inside, Meredith immediately sensed that something was amiss. The house was unusually cold, and an ominous silence hung in the air. Upon ascending to the second floor, Meredith made a shocking discovery. Her sister Michelle lay motionless on the bedroom floor, surrounded by pools of blood. This horrific sight would forever change not only the lives of the Young family, but also the entire Raleigh community. Michelle Young, born Michelle Mary Fisher, came into the world on February 17, 1977, in Sayville, New York. From an early age, she exhibited traits that would later shape her personality, energy, determination, and optimism. As she grew up, Michelle dreamed of a career in finance, particularly aspiring to become a tax attorney. This dream would define her path for many years to come. In school, she excelled academically and was the captain of the cheerleading squad, demonstrating not only academic prowess, but also leadership qualities. Friends and family described Michelle as the all-American girl, cheerful, energetic, and full of enthusiasm. Her childhood was filled with ambitions and a drive for success, which later led her to enroll at North Carolina State University. After graduating from high school, Michelle enrolled at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, taking an important step towards her dream. Moving from the bustling New York to the relatively smaller Raleigh was a significant change in her life. However, Michelle quickly adapted, focusing on her studies in finance. Throughout her 4 years of college, Michelle demonstrated high work ethic and perseverance. Her efforts paid off. She earned a master's degree in accounting. This diploma opened up wide opportunities for her in the financial world. Soon after graduation, Michelle secured a job at a local accounting firm. This position not only provided her with financial stability, but also served as an excellent starting point for further career growth. Michelle quickly established herself as a competent and responsible employee. In February 2001, on the eve of her 24th birthday, Michelle decided to celebrate the occasion with friends at her favorite bar. It was there that a meeting occurred that would change her entire life. Jason Young, a graduate of the same university as Michelle, accidentally knocked over her glass of wine. This awkward moment became the beginning of their acquaintance. Jason apologized and bought Michelle a new drink, after which they struck up a conversation. It turned out they had a lot in common. Both had graduated from North Carolina State University and were passionate fans of the local football team, the Wolf Pack. Jason worked as a sales representative and was known for his charisma and self-confidence. Despite Jason's reputation as a ladies' man, his interest in Michelle seemed genuine. After this meeting, he began to visit Raleigh more frequently, using business trips as an excuse for dates with Michelle. Michelle and Jason's relationship developed rapidly. Despite Michelle's focus on her career and Jason's reputation as immature and impulsive, their feelings grew into a serious relationship. 2 years after they met, Michelle discovered she was pregnant. This news came as a surprise to both of them. Michelle, who had always dreamed of a traditional wedding, hadn't planned on having a child so early. Jason initially stated that he wasn't ready for either children or marriage. However, after a month of deliberation, the couple decided to get married. In August 2003, their wedding took place. Although the decision to marry was partly driven by practical considerations, particularly the need for medical insurance for Michelle, it also reflected their desire to start a family. On March 29, 2004, their daughter, Cassidy Elizabeth Young, was born. Michelle fully devoted herself to motherhood, finding in it a new calling. Soon after Cassidy's birth, the Young family moved into a large house on Birchleaf Drive on the outskirts of Raleigh. It seemed like the embodiment of the American dream, a spacious home surrounded by greenery in a quiet neighborhood. However, it was here that the first signs of problems in their marriage began to surface. Michelle enjoyed her role as a mother and wife. Her sister Meredith moved to Raleigh to help with Cassidy's care. Michelle's relatives, especially her mother Linda, frequently visited the Youngs' house. However, these visits irritated Jason. Tension between Jason and Linda grew. Michelle talked to her mother on the phone daily, sharing details of her life, including problems in her relationship with her husband. This caused additional displeasure for Jason. The couple often argued, and these conflicts were no secret to friends and family. Jason had a hot temper, and Michelle increasingly complained to her mother about his behavior. Despite this, in the spring of 2006, Michelle shared joyful news with Jason: she was pregnant again. In the fall of 2006, when Michelle was 4 months pregnant, the Young family's life seemed outwardly calm. However, hidden problems were growing beneath the surface. Jason, working as a sales representative, often went on business trips. Some of these trips, as it later turned out, had nothing to do with his work. In October, Jason went on a business trip to Florida. In reality, he was visiting an old friend named Michelle Money, with whom he had studied at university. They struck up a romance that quickly developed into a serious relationship. Over the next month, they exchanged almost 1,000 messages. Michelle was unaware of her husband's infidelity. She was focused on her pregnancy and caring for Cassidy. However, tension in the family was increasing. Conflicts between Jason and Michelle's mother Linda were becoming more frequent. Linda often stayed with them and even expressed a desire to move closer to her daughter, which caused Jason's displeasure. On the evening of November 2nd, 2006, Jason set out on another business trip to Clintwood, Virginia, where he had a business meeting scheduled for the morning of November 3rd. The distance to Clintwood was about 300 miles, so Jason decided to stop for the night at the Hampton Inn in Hillsville, approximately halfway. That evening, Michelle invited her friend Shelley over. The women spent time watching a TV show and talking. Michelle shared with her friend some problems in her relationship with Jason, particularly regarding holiday plans. Shelley left around 10 o'clock in the evening, feeling somewhat uncomfortable, as if someone was watching her. Jason checked into the hotel at 10:54 p.m. and entered his room at 10:56 p.m. According to the electronic key data, he did not leave the room again that night. However, the events that followed became the subject of intense investigation and court proceedings over the next few years. On November 3rd, 2006, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Meredith Fisher arrived at her sister's house. Jason had asked her to pick up some eBay printouts he had supposedly left in the home office. Entering through the unlocked garage, Meredith immediately felt that something was wrong. The house was unusually cold. In the kitchen, Meredith saw Michelle's purse and keys. Climbing to the second floor, she made a horrifying discovery. Michelle was lying face down on the bedroom floor, surrounded by pools of blood. The body was cold and stiff. Meredith immediately called emergency services. While talking to the operator, she noticed 2-year-old Cassidy crawling out from under the bed, dressed in clean pink pajamas. The child seemed confused but physically unharmed. Police quickly arrived at the scene. Investigators found that Michelle had suffered numerous blows to the head with a blunt object. An autopsy later confirmed that the cause of death was a traumatic brain injury. Michelle's body had numerous bruises, scratches, and fractures. She had lost several teeth, and a subarachnoid hemorrhage was found on her brain. Investigators immediately turned their attention to the victim's husband, Jason Young. This was standard procedure, as statistics showed that in about 60% of murder cases, victims knew their killers, and in spousal cases, the partner was always the first suspect. Jason claimed he was on a business trip in Virginia. According to his version, he left home on the evening of November 2nd, stopped for the night at the Hampton Inn in Hillsville, and set out for a business meeting in Clintwood on the morning of November 3rd. Hotel records confirmed that Jason checked in around 11 o'clock on the evening of November 2nd. The electronic key to his room was used only once to enter the room. This seemed to confirm his alibi. However, investigators uncovered several suspicious details. A hotel employee noticed that the emergency exit door on the first floor was propped open with a small red pebble at night. Moreover, the surveillance camera near these doors was disconnected at around 11:19 p.m. and remained inoperative until morning. During the investigation, unpleasant details of Jason Young's personal life came to light. Investigators discovered that he had several extramarital affairs. Particular attention was drawn to his relationship with Michelle Money, an old acquaintance of the Youngs from their college days. It was revealed that Jason and Michelle Money had exchanged nearly 1,000 messages during October 2006. On the day before the murder, they contacted each other 51 times. Moreover, Michelle Money was the last person Jason communicated with on November 2nd, and the first he called on the morning of November 3rd. Another woman, Carol Ann Sowerby, confessed to having an intimate relationship with Jason 10 days before Michelle's death. She recounted a strange incident where Jason removed her wedding ring and returned it only the next day. Michelle's friends and relatives also shared their observations. They spoke of frequent arguments between the couple, especially regarding visits from Michelle's mother, Linda. It became known that Jason was not happy about either Michelle's first or second pregnancy. At the crime scene, investigators faced a complex picture of evidence. In the bedroom where Michelle's body was found, 2 different shoe prints were discovered, size 10 and size 12 in the American system. Forensic experts carefully examined these prints, using special lighting and photographic techniques to enhance the visibility of the impressions. Thanks to the clear pattern on the soles, they were even able to determine the specific model of shoes. They were sneakers of a popular brand sold in many stores across the country. 2 small hairs were found on and near Michelle's body that didn't belong to either her or Jason. These hairs were carefully collected, packaged, and sent to the laboratory for DNA analysis. The results showed that the DNA from the hairs didn't match the profiles of anyone in Michelle's immediate circle. 4 DNA samples were found on the jewelry box that also didn't belong to the young couple. These findings raised many questions. Could they belong to the perpetrator, or were they traces left by guests long before the crime? Several unidentified fingerprints were found in various parts of the house. Experts compared them with the fingerprint database, but found no matches. This could mean that the criminal had no prior convictions, or that these prints belonged to one of the house visitors. Jason's computer drew special attention from investigators. When analyzing the search history, they found suspicious queries such as anatomy of a knockout, loss of consciousness from traumatic brain injury, and similar topics. Digital forensics experts tried to establish the exact time of these searches, but faced technical difficulties. It remained unclear whether these searches were related to the crime or had another explanation. Investigators also noted the absence of Michelle's wedding and engagement rings. They thoroughly searched the house, but didn't find these valuable items. At the same time, other jewelry and money remained untouched, ruling out the version of a common robbery. This detail seemed particularly important, considering the testimony about Jason previously removing a ring from his mistress's finger. Forensic experts conducted a detailed analysis of the blood spatter pattern on the walls and furniture in the bedroom. They used special techniques to reconstruct the trajectory of the blows and the attacker's position. This data helped create an approximate picture of how the attack occurred, but didn't give a definitive answer about the perpetrator's identity. Despite a significant amount of physical evidence, the investigation failed to find anything that directly linked Jason to the murder. No traces of Michelle's blood were found in his car, on his clothes, or in his hotel room. Jason's fingerprints in the house were expected and contained no traces of blood. Experts also analyzed surveillance camera recordings on the route between the hotel where Jason stayed and the Youngs' house. They tried to find confirmation of his alibi, or conversely, evidence of his return home on the night of the murder. However, due to the limited number of cameras on the highway and the low quality of night recordings, these searches didn't yield conclusive results. Such a complex and ambiguous picture of evidence created serious difficulties for the investigation. On one hand, there were many suspicious circumstances pointing to Jason's possible involvement in the crime. On the other hand, the lack of direct evidence of his guilt left room for doubt. This situation posed a challenging task for the prosecution: how to convince the jury of the suspect's guilt, relying primarily on circumstantial evidence. Despite the lack of direct evidence, investigators continued to focus their attention on Jason Young. For 3 years after the murder, law enforcement meticulously gathered and analyzed all possible evidence. On December 14, 2009, 3 years after Michelle's death, Jason Young was finally arrested on charges of first-degree murder. This decision was based on a combination of circumstantial evidence and suspicious circumstances. Preparation for the trial lasted almost 2 more years. During this time, the prosecution tried to build a compelling case against Jason, relying on available evidence and testimonies. The first trial of Jason Young began in June 2011. The prosecution presented a theory according to which Jason had planned his wife's murder due to financial difficulties and a desire to leave the marriage. The prosecution argued that after checking into the Hampton Inn in Hillsville, Virginia, Jason secretly left the hotel at night, returned to Raleigh, committed the murder, and then returned. They argued that he interfered with the hotel's surveillance cameras and made a stop at a gas station between Hillsville and Raleigh. The testimony of a gas station employee became a key element of the prosecution. She claimed that around 5 o'clock in the morning on November 3rd, a man in a white SUV stopped at the farthest pump. After an argument about payment, he threw $20, filled up for $15, and left without taking the change. The woman identified Jason in a photograph. The defense insisted on the absence of direct evidence of Jason's guilt. They argued that it was physically impossible to make such a journey, commit murder, and return unnoticed in such a short period of time. After lengthy deliberations, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision. The judge was forced to declare a mistrial. No verdict was reached, which meant the need for a new trial. Parallel to the criminal process, Michelle Young's family filed a civil lawsuit against Jason. Unlike criminal court, where evidence beyond reasonable doubt is required, civil cases demand less stringent standards of proof. Jason completely ignored this lawsuit, refusing to participate in the process. This decision played against him. After reviewing the available evidence, the judge concluded that Jason was indeed responsible for Michelle's death. As a result of the civil process, Jason was ordered to pay $15.5 million to the deceased's family. Although this decision had no direct impact on the criminal case, it significantly influenced public opinion and created additional pressure on Jason. After the unsuccessful attempt to reach a verdict in the first trial, the prosecution got an opportunity to review their strategy and prepare for a retrial. The second trial of Jason Young began in February 2012, almost 5.5 years after Michelle's murder. This time, the prosecution approached the case with new tactics. Firstly, they managed to obtain the court's permission to use the results of the civil lawsuit against Jason as an argument in favor of his guilt. Although this decision sparked controversy among lawyers, the judge deemed it admissible, arguing that the jury had the right to know about all relevant circumstances of the case. Moreover, during the preparation for the new trial, investigators uncovered new information that could be crucial to the case. It was discovered that a year before the murder, Jason had purchased shoes with the same sole pattern as the bloody footprint found in Michelle's room. These shoes were never found, which raised suspicions among investigators. Prosecutors presented this fact as evidence that Jason might have disposed of potential evidence. Prosecutors also focused on building a more detailed psychological profile of Jason. They brought in a behavioral analysis expert who studied Jason's relationship history, his behavior before and after the murder, and presented his findings to the court. This expertise aimed to show that Jason had a predisposition to violent behavior and deception. An important element of the new prosecution strategy was the involvement of additional witnesses. Jason's former fiancée, Genevieve Cargol, agreed to testify. She spoke about instances of domestic violence by Jason, particularly an incident at a wedding in Texas where a drunk Jason forcibly removed her ring during an argument. This testimony was intended to demonstrate to the jury that Jason was capable of aggressive actions towards those close to him. Prosecutors also paid more attention to analyzing phone calls and messages between Jason and his mistress, Michelle Money. They presented a detailed chronology of their communication in the days before and after the murder, trying to show that Jason had a motive to get rid of his wife for the sake of a new relationship. Digital forensics experts conducted additional analysis of Jason's computer, attempting to establish the exact time of suspicious search queries. Although they couldn't obtain definitive results, they were able to narrow down the time frame in which these searches were made, strengthening suspicions about their connection to the crime. Jason's defense, in turn, prepared counter-arguments for each point of the prosecution. They insisted that all evidence against their client was circumstantial and could have alternative explanations. Jason's lawyers also tried to discredit his former fiancée's testimony, claiming she might have personal motives for providing negative characterizations. Preparation for the second trial was intensive and comprehensive. Both sides understood that this might be the last chance to resolve the case in court. The prosecution was determined to achieve a conviction, while the defense sought to prove Jason's innocence, or at least sow enough doubt in the minds of the jurors. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense. The public and media closely followed every step of the process, understanding its importance not only for Michelle's and Jason's families, but also for the entire justice system. This trial was to be decisive in the long and complex case of Michelle Young's murder. The second trial lasted several weeks. The jurors carefully listened to all evidence and testimonies. Unlike the first trial, this time they managed to reach a unanimous decision. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jason Young guilty of first-degree murder. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Reaction to the verdict was mixed. Michelle's family and friends felt relief, believing that justice had finally prevailed. However, some observers expressed doubts about the sufficiency of evidence for such a severe sentence. After the verdict was announced, Jason Young's lawyers immediately began working on an appeal. They argued that the trial court had made several errors that affected the fairness of the process. One of the main arguments of the defense was that the judge allowed the jury to learn about the results of the civil lawsuit against Jason. The lawyers believed that this information could have unfairly influenced the jury's decision. The Court of Appeals agreed with the defense's arguments and overturned the verdict, ordering a new trial. However, before a third trial could begin, the state Supreme Court reviewed this decision and upheld the original verdict. Meanwhile, little Cassidy, who lost her mother and effectively her father, was being raised by her Aunt Meredith and other relatives of Michelle. The family tried to provide the girl with a normal childhood despite the tragic circumstances. The case of Michelle Young left a deep mark on the Raleigh community and beyond. It drew attention to issues of domestic violence and the complexities of investigating crimes without direct evidence. Many in Raleigh still remember Michelle as a vibrant young woman, a devoted mother, and a successful professional. Her tragic death became a reminder of vulnerability, even in seemingly safe suburbs. The case also sparked discussions in legal circles about the role of circumstantial evidence in criminal trials. Some experts believed that Jason's verdict was fair, considering the totality of circumstances. Others expressed concern about establishing guilt based primarily on circumstantial evidence. Michelle's family continued to fight to preserve her memory. They established the Michelle Young Foundation, which provides support to victims of domestic violence and their children. Cassidy, Michelle, and Jason's daughter, grew up under the care of her mother's family. They made every effort to ensure she had a normal childhood, protecting her from excessive media attention to the tragic story of her parents. The case of Michelle Young remains a subject of interest for criminologists and law students. It is often used as an example of the complexity of investigation and prosecution in cases without direct evidence. Despite the verdict, some questions remained unanswered. The identity of the woman allegedly seen in Jason's car on the night of the murder was never established. This gave rise to theories about the possible involvement of other persons in the crime, although the prosecution never officially considered this version. This case also drew attention to the importance of technical evidence in modern criminal investigations. Surveillance camera footage, electronic key data, and computer information became key elements in constructing the picture of the crime. Over the years since the verdict, Jason's supporters continued to insist on his innocence. They created websites and support groups, claiming he had become a victim of a miscarriage of justice. However, for most Raleigh residents, the case of Michelle Young remains a tragic reminder of how quickly a seemingly perfect life can be shattered. It forced many to rethink their relationships and be more attentive to signs of problems in the families of friends and neighbors. Traditionally, thank you for watching, and remind you that it would be great if you support the video by liking and subscribing to the channel.